If you are anything like me, and the given canon answer for this particular question never made much sense to you, then welcome to the first video of my new over-analysis series, where I'll be making various theory and analysis videos for anime as well as video games. Because I happen to like both anime and video games, and Pokemon just so happens to be both, so that's how we're gonna roll. However, if you've seen other Pokemon theories, you're probably familiar with some pretty outlandish things, like the coma theory, or maybe some fan fiction shenanigans like Paul having a crush on Ash, or some other angsty, super dark background. None of that today. I prefer things that seem a bit more realistic for the actual canon, which sometimes means I get stuck. And I was stuck on this question for a really long time. One of the more realistic theories from back in the day is that Brandon the Pyramid King himself was like Paul and Reggie's father or something. But even that theory kind of died out after a pyramiding rage, and there wasn't really any evidence other than Paul being mad at the guy, so yeah, that theory kind of died out. Since episode 655, Paul has yet to make a reappearance in anime, which would usually mean that any unanswered questions will remain unanswered until he does. But even so, out of nowhere, something else from the recent anime has given me a new theory. Something simple, appropriate, surprisingly explains everything in one fell swoop, and actually fits very nicely into the current canon. My theory is that during Reggie's Pokemon journey, Paul traveled with him as a child. Now, how and why does this make such perfect sense, you say? Stay tuned to find out. This is Paul, the 11-year-old who acts and sounds like he's 20 with an attitude problem. At the beginning of the Diamond and Pearl anime series, Paul was shown to be often cruel and rude towards other trainers that he deemed weak. He releases any Pokemon he considers to be not strong enough for his team as well. He has even had the tendency to insult and otherwise put down his own Pokemon upon returning them to a Pokeball, something that initially drew silent disapproval from Cynthia. We don't see him give a straight praise to any of his Pokemon until the Sinnoh League tournament, where he seems to have had a change of heart. But what Paul is most remembered for is the incredibly brutal and arguably inhumane physical training that he put Chimchar through, as well as the emotional abuse in a failed attempt to unleash Chimchar's true power. Paul wants power, and has gone through questionable means to obtain it on more than one occasion. We all who've seen the anime know this. But a particular trait of Paul's that is sometimes overlooked but that I find particularly odd is how reclusive he is. You know, he always seems to be traveling alone, and he never talks to anyone voluntarily other than Nurse Joy and gym leaders. The thing is, for the time in the anime, this was especially odd, since almost every other rival in Sinnoh and Hoenn was shown to have at least one other friend or acquaintance besides Ash and his crew, even other jerks like Drew. With regards to the Sinnoh anime, the most striking detail is that he doesn't even seem to have any friends or acquaintances in his hometown, whereas Dawn, Barry, Kenny, and even Zoe are shown to have hometown friends who show up in the anime, and they even all are shown in at least one flashback from their childhood. Paul, on the other hand, seems to be a complete stranger to Veilstone City. In fact, he's never even shown there in the entire anime. This will be important later, so take note of it. Another memorable trait of his is that he is also described as someone who does things his own way, especially during Diamond and Pearl episode 15, Shapes of Things to Come, when he battled Rourke with Pokemon that have a type disadvantage. Finally, he is also described as the complete opposite of his brother, even by other characters within the show. In Diamond and Pearl episode 128, A Pyramiding Rage, the explanation for Paul's obsession with power is as follows. Apparently, Reggie battled Brandon, the Pyramid King, lost horribly, and Paul was watching. Reggie quit battling sometime after that and became a breeder. The sheer intensity of Paul's anger towards Brandon in this episode ultimately gave me more questions than answers. It just seems odd for someone to let their entire life and training philosophy be ruled by something that happened to a family member who was probably away from home most of the time, as most trainers in the Pokemon anime are. Sure, the concept makes sense, but the results seemed way too extreme for it to be just that, as if there was a missing piece to the puzzle. But my missing piece came from an unexpected source, many years later. Fast forward to the Pokemon X&Y anime. Ash has 3 traveling companions who all have a lot of faith in him, including a very young girl named Bonnie. This isn't the first time a little sibling has traveled with a trainer on their journey, but I think X&Y has painted a much more vivid and involved picture of what traveling with a hardworking Pokemon trainer as a child would really entail. Bonnie stays up past her bedtime to give Ash moral support during training and, well, heck, you know what? I'll just have the Queen of Sappiness herself tell it to you guys.
I didn't understand back at the Santaloon gym, but now I know how hard it really is to earn a gym badge. Ever since Ash saw Grant at the Battle Chateau, he's been doing nothing but preparing to challenge the Solage gym and win a badge. We've all seen how hard Ash has been working. A victory here would mean the world to him, and that's why I'm feeling so nervous.
I think we've all been training really hard together.
Don't worry, Serena, you're so cool. Still surprised that one of her pre-performer monologues is actually useful for something. But anyways, how does Paul fit into all this? Well, hear me out here, because I'm about to explain why Paul traveling with Reggie, at least for some extent of time before he got his first Pokemon, fits so perfectly. So for a minute, let's assume that Paul did travel with Reggie. This would entail a few things. First of all, Paul would have seen firsthand what his brother did to get to where he ended up. This means that Paul did not just see his brother get beat. Paul actually saw all of Reggie's hard work get defeated. This would not just upset Paul, but crucially, it would also force Paul to look back at everything his brother did and try to figure out what he could do better. See where I'm going with this? Paul is doing everything that his brother did not do, because he does not want to fail like his brother did. That's why Paul didn't consider Pokemon as friends. That's why Paul only keeps the strongest Pokemon and releases the others. And it could also be why Paul, as explained in the anime, does things his own way. Ultimately, this is why Paul is Reggie's complete and total opposite. But this isn't the only thing that traveling with his brother would match up with. There's more. It has been implied that there is another effect that travel can have on young children in the Pokemon universe. In X&Y episode 48, where Barney spends most of the episode helping some kids protect the Lapras, Clement makes a point out of thanking the kids for becoming friends with Bonnie. Now that I think of it, Bonnie does not seem to have any very stable relationships with other kids her age. And even when provided the opportunity to hang out with kids her age, she seems to prefer the company of the Pokemon rather than the other kids. That is, unless she can show off her knowledge of Pokemon anyways. We also have yet to see anyone who personally knows Bonnie from Lumiose City other than her brother and father. And common sense from real life also follows that someone who grew up on the road would have difficulty maintaining any long-term relationships. Lo and behold, this matches Paul perfectly. At least that we've seen this far. Not to mention, traveling on the road from a younger age would make Paul more physically and probably mentally fit than the average trainer his age. As far as we know, he has only competed in the Kanto, Johto, and Hoenn leagues. Paul is portrayed as older than Ash. However, in fact, Ash actually has more experience than him in confirmed canon. Since Ash has traveled through the Orange Islands and Kanto for a second time while challenging the Battle Frontier, neither of which Paul seems to have done. Even if Paul being more competent than Ash would not raise too many eyebrows on its own, I figured it was at least worth mentioning. Because, I mean, look at this. And this. Who does he think he is, Tarzan? For the entirety of the anime, Paul and Reggie's parents are also nowhere to be seen. And there is no mention of them either. Since Reggie apparently runs his own business, it's entirely possible that he can own this house on his own. Reggie doesn't just care for Paul's Pokemon. He evidently has clients in Snowpoint City halfway across the region, where he had showed up for the Pyramiding Rage episode saying that he had just dropped off a Pokemon that was under his care. But how long have Paul and Reggie's parents been missing? If there were no parents present, then Reggie would have had no choice but to take Paul with him on his journey if he was going to leave the house at all. Yeah, it's getting pretty dark, isn't it? Well, Brock had a similar background anyway, so there's that. Now for the plot holes. You might be asking why none of the gym leaders recognize Paul, assuming that he traveled with Reggie through Sinnoh. Wouldn't they remember Paul from before? Well, for starters, we have only seen Paul interact with 3 gym leaders. And they all just so happen to be the youngest looking gym leaders in the Sinnoh region. We know for a fact that Maylene only became gym leader recently. And at least at the time when Zoe found her Glamia, Candace, the Snow Point City gym leader, was still a student. And even Rourke seems to have been entrusted with the Orberg gym fairly recently. For starters, even though his inexperience is never explicitly stated, for a gym leader he is easily surprised and frustrated during his gym battles. And his youth is emphasized in not just his voice acting, English voice acting by the way, but also his animations. In the episode called Ancient Family Matters, we learned that Byron actually used to be the Orberg City gym leader. But then he ran off to become the Canalave City gym leader and left Rourke, the current gym leader, in charge. In the flashback we see of this, Rourke doesn't look that much younger than he does today. Now let's take a look at Reggie's flashback. Based on physical appearance, the passage of time between these flashbacks and the present day seems to be give or take about the same. And then bear in mind that Reggie's flashback we have takes place at the end of Reggie's journey. Even more time has passed since Reggie would have battled at the Orberg or Snow Point gym. So yeah, maybe this isn't such a big plot hole after all. And even if either of these gym leaders were somehow still gym leader at the time that Reggie got the gym badge, other explanations for this possible plot hole includes Paul simply not having started traveling with Reggie at the time. I mean, hey, I never said that Paul had to travel with Reggie through Sinnoh specifically. Or perhaps they just don't recognize Paul and he's not bothering to remind them. Seems in character form. And bad memory?
Just a moment. I'm having a talk with this fossil right now.
Seems plausible. Anyways, here are the possible explanations. Oh, and here's one more head scratcher. And for this one, we get to blame the English dubbers. In the English dub, it's said that Paul came to watch Reggie's battle with Brandon in the middle of his own Sinnoh journey. This makes it sound like Paul just left home like a normal trainer and started his journey right outside his doorstep. It does sound a little too confusing for Paul to have gone from Kanto to Sinnoh, travel through Sinnoh a bit, to go back to Kanto, and then travel through Kanto. Nah, that sounded fishy. So to be sure, I dug a little deeper. And lo and behold, there was a mistranslation. According to Dagasu's backpack, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but Dagasu, yeah, something along those lines. According to Dagasu's backpack, and a fan-subbed version of the episodes from a shady site in the darkest depths of the internet that I will probably never find again, yeah. I'm just gonna quote directly from Dagasu's backpack and trust his little description primarily. Satoshi is Ash, Shinji is Paul. Quote, Reggie tells Satoshi and his friends that Shinji decided to go to Kanto before traveling through Sinnoh, not during. I don't know Japanese well enough to actually translate anything myself, so I can't know for sure if the Japanese version really supports my theory or not. But what it does do for almost certainty is eliminate the unnecessary traveling through Sinnoh before he comes back to Kanto. It's also notable that despite the fact that Paul's starter is clearly a Turtwig, a Sinnoh starter, for some reason Professor Rowan doesn't recognize him, indicating that either Professor Rowan has bad memory, or Paul did not get his starter directly from him. For all I know, with my limited knowledge of Japanese, Paul might not have gone back to Sinnoh at all. He could have just had the Pokemon transported to him. Whatever the case, when there is a discrepancy between the Japanese and English versions, in the past it was always, to my knowledge, the Japanese version that overwrote the English. The most notable example being when they said that Brock's mom passed away, like literally she passed away, dead, but then well, in the Japanese version, she didn't get sick or die at all, she ran away. So when she returned, notably alive, the English dub just for the most part pretended the mistranslation never happened. Alright then, what do you guys think? Did Paul actually travel with Reggie? Or did Reggie just visit home from time to time and that's that? It's also entirely possible that something happened during Paul's journey in Kanto, Johto, or Hoenn that caused or intensified Paul's obsession of power. But there isn't any evidence for anything there, so really, literally anything could have happened in that time frame. Personally, I think I'm still in the camp that likes this theory that Paul probably did travel with his brother for some extent of time. If only because it also happens to match up with other traits of his character besides just his obsession with power. But let me know your own thoughts on Paul's character in the comment section. I'm still kind of new to making these kinds of videos, so I'd love some feedback. And remember to subscribe for similar videos in the future. See ya!